video, I'd like to chat about travel and the impact that chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia has on travel. As a person in ministry with Power to Change and students, I worked for many years doing lots of traveling. Almost every 3 months would be some traveling required to go back to my hometown to raise financial support or to go on mission projects both nationally and internationally. I first started to go on international projects during my time as a student at the University of Saskatchewan. My first overseas trip was to Brazil in 1993, and I had an amazing time there. It's where I really started to understand discipleship and imparting the things I've learned to others and having a vision for what that could do. And I made some really good friends in Brazil and really fell in love with the culture there. I then returned to Brazil in 1994 and had 2 months there, started to learn the language more, lived with the people, and definitely loved the travel, being able to go to these places. But I did notice that there was some issues with my body in terms of air travel. And when I would fly for these extended hours and have long layovers in several airports, I just noticed an intense fatigue that came over me, and I became extremely irritable and grumpy and very depressed, and actually quite taken up by negative thoughts and just very sensitive to any comments people make, always comparing myself to others and feeling insecure. And I remember even on one of the trips on our debrief to come back to Canada, I remember just feeling suicidal and being tempted to just throw myself out of the hotel, and just feeling so washed out and just depleted because of the good time I was having there. But my body just did not like the travel and the impending travel of returning home to Canada. And so after subsequent trips to Asia, to Africa, to South America, probably about 8 trips internationally, as well as short-term projects in Canada, in the city of Calgary, leading a student's body of about 50 students, summer after summer, then coming back, going on vacation, going to staff conference. It was just a lot of travel, and it started to really wear on me. And it got so bad eventually that I would even just barely survive the travel to the destination, whether it was, say, Ottawa or even in closer places in Vancouver, even Whistler and different areas we have our conferences in. I would just feel depleted by the time I got there, and just the anxiety and anticipation anxiety I had of seeing so many people and trying to relate to them all, trying to survive a noisy cafeteria and conversations with my sensitivities and just the overload. I would just end up curling up in my hotel room or dorm room and just take a fetal position and try to recover. I didn't have any extra energy for extracurricular activities. I barely had energy for the sessions and for the social times in between at meals. I started to eat meals by myself in my room. I just kind of shut myself off and started to be selective about what sessions I could attend, until the point where our group started meeting in Ontario, and I could no longer make the flights to Ontario. And so I just stopped going to the staff conferences, and because of flight, the way my body reacts. And probably the most stark wake-up call for me was I did a long trip to Ontario for some work-related things, and then I added a trip to Indianapolis to meet a friend there who had moved there from Vancouver, and we were going to go attend a men's conference together. And in the process of getting to Chicago and Indianapolis, I felt okay, nothing major. But on the flight home from Chicago to Vancouver, I was sitting beside a very, high energy person that was just very fidgety. And he kept on offering me food to eat, and I kind of tried to refuse, but he insisted. And so I did take some of it, but I noticed too that during the flight, my mouth was extremely dry. I felt my heart rate going up, and I just felt extremely uncomfortable and agitated. And when we landed, I was just so thankful to get off that plane. And it just did something to my body that I can't describe, but it just felt like my body was sick and anemic and just gross. And once I got home, I remember trying to recover from that trip, and it took me a while. But what was shocking to me was not too long later, I started having severe pains in my chest. And I was at my son's hockey practice, and I started to feel these pains coming on in my chest, right here over where I thought my heart was feeling it. And I was concerned. I had already been to the cardiologist, and they had already said that I had a clean bill of heart health, but I still was scared. And so I just told my fellow coaches, like, I just need to sit down on the bench. And ironically, after skating around and such, I sat down on the bench, but then even felt worse. I felt nausea. I felt just, like I didn't want to be there. I just wanted to be somewhere where I could just rest. And so, I got out of my hockey gear, got my son out of his hockey gear, somehow made it to the car. On the way home, I just found steering the car was actually incredibly difficult and painful to steer. But I managed to make it home. And as my family was eating dinner, I just, was lying on the couch, and suddenly I had 2 or 3 really sharp kind of knife stabbing pains in my chest. And that was really concerning. But nobody knew what it was. I had a clean bill of health of my heart again. I had already seen cardiologists, so that wasn't an issue, but I kept going back to my doctor, and until the emergency ward said, look, don't come back here if you have these pains because you have no heart problems. And so it wasn't until a while later that I realized that was probably an onset of a panic attack. And many years later, I did suffer a pretty severe panic attack, but that was my first, after realizing what it was, first indication that I was suffering from panic as well, from anxiety and just from the pushing of my body in hockey or even in flying. And so that was a wake-up call to me to restrict my flying in terms of the amount of flying I do, but also the hour and the duration of my flights. I did attempt to fly to Ottawa after this incident. My father-in-law requested that I go with my family to celebrate church's 40th anniversary. And I was really reluctant to go. I told him I really don't want to go, but to honor him, he was willing to pay too. And so I just wanted to respect him as much as I could, but that flight was such a reminder to me just what flight does to my body. And so I arrived in Ottawa with such a headache, such nausea, that my wife had to drive our rental car to our place where we were going to stay. And I told her, like, I can't look to the left or right to help you right now or help you with navigation because I'm just going to throw up because I'm so ill right now and so dizzy and nauseated. And so we got to our friend's destination. They were hosting us graciously, and I just remember them welcoming us, and I was just, not in a good state. And I was just very upfront with them, like, I'm not doing well right now. And one of my friends, struggles also with health, and so she was very understanding, and they just let me rest and recover for the next days. And it took me a long time to recover. I don't think I recovered within that week that I was there. I wasn't able to attend any of the activities for the church, not just due to my own illness, but also to my family had some issues as well. And so it was just kind of a testament to me that I need to be restrictive of my air travel in terms of duration. And so thankfully, my trips home to Saskatoon aren't quite as long. It's about 2 hours, and that seems to be my window of what I can tolerate. Even that is a challenge for me. What I find really stressful is the security, going through all the checks, getting in queue in the line, and just the whole getting onto the plane. Like, all of you understand how stressful that can be, and who you're sitting beside, and what's happening on the plane around you in terms of noise. And my tolerance of noise on the plane isn't very good. I usually wear earplugs or headphones, noise canceling headphones. Not when I take off though. There's some sort of strange frequency that really makes a mess of your sound system. And so I just put it on after takeoff. But those are some of the lessons I'm learning. And so it's, another stage of trusting God with being more homebound, not being able to travel to more distant locations. I really enjoy traveling. I really enjoy aviation. I'm a plane enthusiast. I plane spot all the time. I collect die-cast planes. I like just the whole aviation industry, and I've toured Boeing plant in Everett, Washington. I've toured the Vancouver airport here in Vancouver. Anywhere I can get tours of Air Canada, WestJet, all these different ones. And so I'm definitely very sad to be in a new stage of life where I can't handle air travel, that my body just can't handle it, that it seems to stress it and put it into a stress state. Partly because of, I think, the crowds, the security, but also I think just the cabin pressure and the pressures on the human body that perhaps, our human body wasn't meant to endure that kind of pressures and intensity for that duration of time or at all. And so I grieve that I can't travel, but I'm thankful that I can still travel more close to home. And I can enjoy just watching planes fly. I can live vicariously through others who take trips. And I do struggle at times with being jealous of others who can have both the energy and the resources to fly and to travel. It's sad for me not to be able to go to new places and be able to see new people and new cultures, and also new geography as well. And to see different parts of God's creation. But in that, I find that God is helping me to be content where I'm at and to be thankful for what's around me, for the water, the mountains, the trees, the forests right around me, and taking a lot of time actually to go to those places that are right in my own vicinity, the parks, the hikes, the short walks I can take in this area that are, again, not pushing my energy envelope. They're usually small little walks from the parking lot, little hikes, little walks, nothing too strenuous, but just getting out and enjoying God's creation and meeting people. And so very sad that I can't travel like I used to, but I'm learning to adjust my expectations and be willing to say for this season that I need to restrict my travel, and God willing, maybe in the future I'll be able to travel further, and I am learning different things, like to rest lots before a flight and try to book my flights within sane hours of waking up and rhythms of being awake and not doing any overnight trips, and trying to do direct flights with no layovers. But that's not easy always to plan, and I'm still learning. I'm questioning whether I should, buy a more expensive ticket to sit at the front of the plane, for example. Should I board first? I've tended to board last, but then you don't have to feel crammed in there for so long. But these are questions I'm still working through and trusting God with, and to still enjoy travel without having to travel abroad into exotic places, which I think is so appealing to us. And that we don't sometimes we take for granted the ability we have with our passport and our travel and our just the available purchase capital that we have in Canada to travel. And so I'm trusting God with these things that I've felt the loss of, but also trusting Him that that's okay for this season in life. So perhaps you're a person who struggles with chronic fatigue or other illnesses that prevent you from travel, and maybe this will be an encouragement to you to trust God, even though maybe we don't settle our head on the far side of the sea, that He's right here with us, and He knows us, and He knows we're weak and our frame is weak, and that we need to rely on Him, and better living within, instead of resenting not being able to go, but better learning to live within the limits we do have. One other thing that just came to mind is the whole theme of resurrection and the hope that we have in Jesus, that he rose from the dead, but that's just the first fruits of a resurrection of our bodies one day, but also the whole earth and the whole cosmos. And this is my understanding that has been growing through reading Randy Elkhorn and others who look at a resurrected universe, that all things are going to be made new by Jesus. And so sometimes you'll hear people say things like, you only go around once, so you got to live it to the fullest, or YOLO, you only live once. But these are not actually true to scripture for the believer, that we will be raised, like Job says, I will see him with my own eyes and walk upon this earth made new. And so I don't have the fear perhaps of missing out like I would if I didn't know Jesus, because the hope is that we will walk as his followers with Jesus on the new resurrected earth, and in much better shape than it is even now. I do treasure the beauty that's still in this creation of God's, even though it's fallen. There's a beauty in what God has made, and I want to take it in as much as I can and rejoice and praise God for it, and have opportunity as God allows to see different places, their beauty. And I'm so thankful to God for the opportunity to have traveled so much in my youth, and to be able to document it with photography or videos. This video or picture behind me is actually from Moraine Lake, and I took it, I don't know when, but a number of years ago, and I recently had it enlarged. And I had intended to give it to my parents, but I was having difficulty getting it on the plane because of the size of it, and my restrictions, because I was not paying the extra for extra luggage. So anyway, I decided to use it for a few sessions in this channel anyway, as I try to figure out backgrounds and such. But yeah, just enjoying God's creation. I'm very grateful for all the travel that I've been able to experience. But again, there is a hope that one day I will have a resurrected body, that you will have a resurrected body by faith in Jesus, and that we will be able to experience a new Moraine Lake in Canada, a new Africa, a new South America, a new Asia, and a new entire cosmos that we'll be able to travel. And I'm not sure if we'll have air travel at that point. Maybe we won't need it, but there's a sense where I have anticipation actually of future travels that I'll have, maybe not in this life, in this fallen world, but in the new world and the resurrected life. And so that's a deep hope that I have in my faith in Jesus.